Hello everyone, my name is Garrett Knoll, and today I'm going to be critiquing the very obscure game Tenchu Z. Now while this game is practically unheard of, I've been playing it on and off for about 7 years. Aside from explaining why I've been playing a practically non-existent game for such a long time, my goal here is to analyze this game's unorthodox method of teaching players how to play it, and how that ties into the concept of what a skill curve is, and what it can do for the player's overall experience with the game. For many of you, this may be your first time hearing of this game, so I'm going to explain a bit of what it is and how it plays. Tenchu Z was developed by K2, a sister company of Capcom, and From Software, the creators of Demon's Souls and Dark Souls. It's the 7th game in the Tenchu series, and the first to feature customizable characters and cooperative play. Despite its heritage as a Sony console exclusive in previous iterations of the series, Tenchu Z was developed exclusively for the Xbox 360. Also strange given a very Japanese origin and theme. If you hear any English spoken in the game, you'd probably be the first to hear it. This game is a stealth-based action-adventure title that follows the story of a player-created ninja from feudal-era Japan. The story finds the player working as an assassin to help the small country of Goda in its war against neighboring Ogawara. That's about as deep as the plot gets, despite having some pretty memorable characters, but I didn't fall in love with this game for the writing. The assassinations are carried out as semi-sequential missions, each taking place in a town-sized open-world environment populated by guards and some civilians. Much like the earlier Hitman games by IO Interactive, the player can silently kill any enemy within close proximity, as long as that enemy is not alerted to the player's presence. Operating silently is well rewarded at the end of missions, as the unexplainable deaths of Ogawaran guards and officials aids in demoralizing the country's large army. Many critics pan the gameplay for being repetitive and difficult to control, but in this case, my experience differs. I've been a long-time fan of stealth games and prefer progressing through dangerous parts with patience and caution, likely contributing to my resonance with this game. I picked up Tenchu Z for this very reason. Most of the gaming industry's lineup of ninja-themed games consisted of hack-and-slash combat mechanics, so Tenchu hit a lot of good points with me immediately. Initially when I played it, I was thrust into creating a character, and fine-tuning his basic skills to match how I wanted to play the game. This led to the tutorial mission where I had absolutely no idea what was going on, which is actually in my opinion how all games should greet their players, as this game soon introduced a concept to me that drives my theories behind what makes up a quality game to this day. Completing the first mission was brutal, as the game really pressed me to maintain flawless stealth as I progressed. Hiding bodies, looking in the shadows, moving slowly, dressing in dark clothing for night, bright for day, and even cleaning myself to prevent enemies from smelling my blood-coated character. If I were to be caught, attacking my enemy head-on would always result in my death, yet I loved every minute of it. Tenchu delivered a solid stealth formula, and was forgiving of mistakes when I kept my composure and stuck to that formula. Soon my understanding of the game's mechanics grew to the point I became adept at remaining undetected, and the controls became second nature. I had unknowingly been ushered into that concept I mentioned earlier, something that fans of From Software's games may be familiar with, as I just mastered Tenchu's first skill curve, achieving perfect stealth. Instead of telling me exactly what I needed to do, and how to do it, like many games do these days, Tenchu had this skill curve principle, putting me in control of my character and letting me figure things out for myself. While this teaching method was confusing at first, it brought with it a sense of empowerment each time I learned something new about the game. Whenever I figured out how to do something for myself, like using the grappling hook for instance, it felt good knowing I only had myself to thank for that new knowledge. This is implementation of a skill curve at its finest, as I felt that I was truly becoming a better assassin on my own accord, instead of how with countless other games I was outright told how to play the game. Playing the game is the responsibility of the player, and many games ruin themselves by walking their players through all of their features. This realization offered a good explanation for why reviewers had pushed this game into a corner of obscurity. Reviewers often have little time with the game, and as such, games that immediately lay out everything for the player are easier to grade. Tenchu introduces things slowly to the player, and the player learns only through patience and trying new things. Tenchu evidently still had much more to offer at this point, as I began to look into the skills and abilities that the player earns as he or she progresses. Each skill the player's character learns, the player must learn to use effectively. One example is a very useful move that lets players sprint very quickly for a short burst, in a single direction before stopping to recover. If a player uses this and ends up hitting a wall, his character will hit his head hard, alerting anyone in the immediate area to his presence. These skills, when used appropriately, added a separate layer of complexity and offered up a second skill curve, becoming an unstoppable warrior. At the point where I began to invest in new abilities for my character and teach myself to use them appropriately, I found myself soon afterward possessing enough combat prowess to defend myself against a single guard, were I clumsy enough to get caught. But I soon learned that guards like to call for help once I got the upper hand, reinforcing the necessity to hide. In any case, I continued to practice with new abilities until the point where I could change the entire atmosphere of the game with the progress I made. That was when I could really go on the offensive. So, despite Tenchu more than fulfilling its role as a stealth-centric game, the amount of prowess the player and his or her character can achieve can dwarf that of the enemies the player used to fear early on. I've played games before that have utilized a similar hunted becomes the hunter scenario, but Tenchu's skill curve sets it apart, as the ability to overpower your enemies in open combat here feels as though it is as much as a milestone for the player as it is for the player's character. I could easily sprint through the map, slicing through my adversaries as I passed, and while the game was still a cautious, stealthy game at heart, my new ability to control the pace more freely was an experience no other game has managed to emulate in the same way. So that's a quick look at my experience with Tenchu Z, and a little on the philosophy of the skill curve it uses to invoke a sense of personal progression in its player. I would highly recommend for those that have an Xbox 360 to give Tenchu Z a try. It's only like $9 at GameStop. I'd also like it if you would take a look at some of the other videos on this channel. There's a lot of cool people with cool things to say. That's all I have for today, but if you would like to ask me a question or show me an obscure game that you like, feel free to contact me at garrettpatricknoll@gmail.com.